How'd you get the nickname? Since we're talking about the corrupting nature of money.
That came from poker. In a poker game, when you sit down, it's chaos, especially like in our home game. There's a ton of big egos. There's people always watching, railbirding the game, all kinds of interesting folks. And in that, somebody needs to establish hygiene and rules. Mm-hmm. And I really care about the integrity of the game. And it would just require somebody to just say, okay, enough. And then people were just like, okay, stop dictating. And that's where that nickname.
So who to you, speaking of which, is the greatest poker player of all time, and why is it Phil Hellmuth?
Exactly. Muth probably knew this question was coming. Here's what I'll say. I think Hellmuth is the antidote to computers, more than any other player playing today. And when you see him in a heads-up situation, so I think like he's played 9 or 10 heads-up tournaments in a row, and he's played like basically call it 10 of the top 20 people so far, and he's beaten all but one of them. When you're playing heads-up, 1v1, that is the most GTO understandable spot, meaning game theory optimal position. That's where computers can give you an enormous edge. The minute you add even a third player, the value of computers and the value of their recommendations basically falls off a cliff, okay? So one way to think about it is Hellmuth is forced to play against people that are essentially trained like AIs. And so to be able to beat, 8 out of 9 of them means that you are playing so orthogonally to what is considered game theory optimal. And you're overlaying human reasoning. The judgment to say, well, in this spot, I should do X, but I'm going to do Y. It's not dissimilar in chess, like what makes, Magnus Carlsen so good. Sometimes he takes these weird lines, he'll sacrifice positions, he'll overplay certain positions or certain, bishops versus knights, and all of these spots that are very confusing. And what it does is it throws people off their game. I think he just won a recent online tournament, and it's like by move 6, there is no GTO move for his opponent to make because it's like out of the rule book. Maybe he read some game. I read the quote. It was like he probably read some game in some bar in Russia in 1954, memorized it, and all of a sudden, by 6 moves in, the computer AI is worthless. So that's what makes Hellmuth great. There is one person that I think is superior. And I think it's what Daniel also said, and I would echo that because I played Phil as well. But Phil Ivey is the most well-rounded, cold-blooded, bloodthirsty animal. He's just, and he sees into your soul, Lex, in a way where you're just like, oh my God, stop looking at me.
Have you ever played him?
Yeah, we've played, and he crushes the games.
So what does feeling crushed mean and feel like in poker? Is it like that you just can't read at all, you're being constantly pressured, you feel off balance, you try to bluff and the person reads you perfectly, that kind of stuff?
This is a really, really excellent question because I think this has parallels to a bunch of other things. Okay, let's just use poker as a microcosm to explain a bunch of other systems or games. Maybe it's running a company or investing, okay? So let's use those 3 examples, but we use poker to explain it. What does success look like? Well, success looks like you have positive expected value, right? In poker, the simple way to summarize that is your opponent, let's just say you and I are playing, are going to make a bunch of mistakes. There's a bunch of it that's going to be absolutely perfect. And then there's a few spots where you make mistakes. And then there's a bunch of places in the poker game where I play perfectly and I make a few mistakes. Basically, your mistakes minus my mistakes is the edge, right? That's how poker works. If I make fewer mistakes than you make, I will make money and I will win. That is the objective of the game. Translate that into business. You're running a company. You have a team of employees. You have a pool of human capital that's capable of being productive in the world and creating something. But you are going to make mistakes in making that. Maybe it doesn't completely fit the market. Maybe it's mispriced. Maybe it actually doesn't require all of the people that you need, so the margins are wrong. And then there's the competitive set of all the other alternatives that customer has. Their mistakes minus your mistakes is the expected value of Google, Facebook, Apple, etc. Okay? Now take investing. Every time you buy something, somebody else on the other side is selling it to you. Is that their mistake? We don't know yet. But their mistakes minus your mistakes is how you make a lot of money over long periods of time as an investor. Somebody sold you Google at $40 a share. You bought it and you kept it. Huge mistake on their part, minimum mistakes on your part. The difference of that is the money that you made. So life can be summarized in many ways in that way. So the question is, what can you do about other people's mistakes? And the answer is nothing. That is somebody else's game. You can try to influence them. You could try to subvert them. Maybe you plant a spy inside of that other person's company to sabotage them. I guess there are things at the edges that you can do. But my firm belief is that life success really boils down to how do you control your mistakes? Now, this is a bit counterintuitive. The way you control your mistakes is by making a lot of mistakes.
So taking risks
You have to.
is somehow
You have to.
a
You
way
have
to minimize the number of mistakes.
Let's just say you want to find love.
Yeah.
You know, you want to find somebody
Go
that
on.
you're deeply connected with.
Yeah.
Do you do that by not going out on dates and
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're gonna be the
So-
only person that
sorry.
thinks that's the answer to that
No,
question.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, but you
That's
know what I mean? Like, you have to date people, you have to open yourself up, you have to be authentic, and like you give yourself a chance to get hurt.
Yes.
But you're a good person. So you know what happens when you get hurt? That is actually their mistake. Okay? And if you are inauthentic, that's your mistake. That's a controllable thing in you. You can tell them the truth, who you are, and say, here's my pluses and minuses. My point is, there are very few things in life that you can't break down, I think, into that very simple idea. And in terms of your mistakes, society tells you don't make them because we will judge you and we will look down on you. And I think the really successful people realize that actually, no, it's the cycle time of mistakes that gets you to success. Because your error rate will diminish the more mistakes that you make. You observe them, you figure out where it's coming from. Is it a psychological thing? Is it a, cognitive thing? And then you fix it.
So the implied thing there is that there's in business and investing, in poker, in dating, in life, is that there's this platonic GTO game theory optimal thing out there, and so when you say mistakes, you're always comparing to that optimal path you could have taken.
I think slightly different. I would say mistake is maybe a bad proxy, but it's the best proxy I have for learning. But I'm using the language of what society tells you.
Sure, got it.
Society tells you that when you try something and it doesn't work, it's a mistake. So I just use that word because it's the word that resonates most with most people.
Got it.
The real thing that it is learning.
Yeah, it's like in neural networks, it's loss.
It's a neural network. It's lost, exactly.
Yeah, right. So you're using the mistake that is most, the word that is most understandable, especially by the way people experience it. I guess most of life is a sequence of mistakes. The problem is when you use the word mistake and you think about mistakes, it actually has the counterproductive effect of you becoming conservative in just being risk averse. So that if you flip it and say try to maximize the number of successes, somehow that leads you to take more risk. Mistake scares people.
I think mistakes scare people because society likes these very simplified boundaries of who is winning and who is losing. And they want to reward people who make traditional choices and succeed. But the thing is, what's so corrosive about that is that they're actually not even being put in a position to actually make a quote unquote mistake and fail. So I'll give you, if you look at like getting into an elite school, right? Society rewards you for being in the Ivy Leagues in a way that, in my opinion, incorrectly, doesn't reward you for being in a non Ivy League school. There's a certain level of status and presumption of intellect and capability that comes with being there. But that system doesn't really have a counterfactual because it's not as if you both go to MIT and Ohio State. And then we can see two versions of Lex Fridman so that we can figure out that the jig is up and there was no difference. Right? And so instead, it reinforces this idea that there is no truth seeking function. There is no way to actually make this thing whole. And so it tells you you have to get in here. And if you don't, your life is over. You've made a huge mistake, or you've failed completely. And so you have to find different, unique ways of dismantling this. This is why, part of what I've realized where I got very lucky is I had no friends in high school. I had a few cohort of acquaintances. But part of being so hypervigilant when I grew up was I was so ashamed of that world that I had to live in. I didn't want to bring anyone into it. I could not see myself that anybody would accept me. But the thing with that is that I had no definition of what expectations should be. So they were not guided by the people around me. And so I would escape to define my expectations.